Welcome everybody, 2025. Our annual general meeting for Living Lakes. Just a few housekeeping issues before we start. We are recording the AGM. We love it if you ask questions either during a particular section of the meeting, or we are going to have a dedicated Q&A at the end. So feel free to do either of those, and you can either put your hand up, your virtual Zoom hand up, or write it in the chat. Nicole will be monitoring both of those as we go. There are a few places tonight during the meeting when we do have to vote, and only Living Lakes members can vote. And if you have voting privileges, you would have been informed in your package that you were sent earlier in the week. If you didn't receive that correspondence, then you just got to be patient during those times and think about how much better life would be if you were a member. And you can then email info@livinglakescanada.ca. It's free, and we would love for you to join us. If you do get disconnected, we just simply ask you to reconnect. And the final thing is if you see me mute myself and put my screen down, it's because I'm having a major coughing attack. I'm living on like lozenges and water and stuff. I don't know how many of you are struggling with this cough that's going around, but I'm not sick. I just have a cough. Living Lakes Canada acknowledges that our work in water stewardship takes place across the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of many Indigenous nations and peoples throughout what is now known as Canada. We are committed to listening and learning in partnership with Indigenous peoples to protect fresh water for generations to come. As board chair, I feel immense gratitude to live and work in Invermere on the traditional territories of the Ktunaxa and the Secwepemc peoples. Here at the headwaters of the Columbia River, I'm constantly reminded of the sacredness and power of water, not just as a vital resource, but as a connector of ecosystems, cultures, and communities. It has been a privilege to help guide the organization's work in supporting water stewardship across the many diverse territories we serve. Our meeting makes quorum tonight. We just need 5 voting members, which we indeed have. So the members will have been sent a copy of the agenda in their correspondence earlier. And if I could get a motion to adopt the agenda as written. Somebody can put up their hand or write their name in the chat. Roberta is gonna, oh, no, okay.
I don't have voting power.
Okay. So somebody with voting power.
I move to adopt the agenda.
Okay, so Paul is adopting the agenda and we need a seconder.
I'll second.
Liz, and all those in favor, if you can just raise your hand. Any opposed? And the motion is carried. And then again, people will have been sent the minutes from last year's AGM. And so I just need a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I'll make the motion. It's Mandy.
Thanks, Mandy.
And I'll second it. It's Laura.
And Laura seconding. All those in favor? Great. Motion is carried. Now I get to do my report. So when Kat asked me to sit on the board of Living Lakes in 2017, I thought, sure, I've never done that before. It's going to be good learning. I don't really know what a board does. And then Paul said, Jane, why don't you be the chair? And I thought very similar things. And 8 years later, I am stepping down. I am tremendously grateful for my experience and my learning, but mostly I am very grateful that this organization exists and that I am leaving it in very capable hands. Our country needs Living Lakes. We need it to continue to fulfill its mandate, collaborating to protect water in a changing climate. Climate change is a reality, and the data that Living Lakes gathers and the programs that it is running are crucial in aiding adaptation. You will hear today how our groundwater monitoring program, in collaboration with the Piikani Nation, is taking steps to aid water monitoring and security in drought-stricken southern Alberta. You will hear how publicly available data from volunteer observation wells is informing critical studies and strengthening aquifer protection. You will read on our website how our water resource mapping helped the BC Wildlife Service protect the community of Argenta during last year's July wildfire, and how communities are reaching out to us for similar water mapping plans. You will also read how Living Lakes Canada connects people to water through the Centre for Water Excellence for Youth and the Lake Blitz program. The thing about being in an organization from the beginning is you can make change and growth quite quickly, but the satisfaction also comes from the slow maturing process. We have our policies and procedures tweaked, our job descriptions nailed down, our employee handbook done, our strategic plan in action, and our finances are solid. We have a board with a wealth of experience, a senior leadership team, deputy director, and executive director who are dedicated, innovative, financially astute, and passionate. It has been an honor and a privilege to have been part of the organization. I'm now going to introduce Paul Bach, our treasurer, and Brian Duffett, our finance manager, to present the financials.
Well, thanks very much, Jane, for your introduction and for after several years of leading the organization. I'm stepping down as treasurer as well, but I'll be staying with the board. And Scott Meakin is going to be stepping into the treasurer's role now. And Scott has a wealth of experience in the not-for-profit sector and in the corporate area. He's very strategic and very savvy with the financial aspects of organizations. And I think it's a really great time for him to come on board, because I'm happy to report that from our beginnings as a society in 2017 and then an NGO in 2018, we've grown our budget, since it was a few $100,000 back then, and we're over 3 million now. And that's thanks, of course, to the senior leadership team and to all of the campaigners and individuals that raise the money and do the work. And of course, we've expanded our work as a result of Kat's vision for various things. So that's just a little bit of background. As far as the financial and treasurer's report at this point, we had audited once again this year by a new auditor and did very well in their eyes, and everything looks to be in good shape. Our financials are solid. It's an ever-changing financial challenge for the organization, because as politics change, it's harder and harder sometimes to have the contributions there. And so it's, although we're in a good position, it's something that we always worry about as an organization, because it could change. But right now we're doing well. We've passed the audit really very well. And thanks to Brian, who has made a huge difference to the organization as we've grown with our budget over the years, for getting us in good financial health. And he is now going to present, I think he'll do the best job of the numbers in a way that I think most people will best understand how we're doing as an organization. So Brian, I'd like to hand that over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. Yeah, my name is Brian Duffett. I'm the finance manager for Living Lakes. I've been in this role for almost 3 years now, which is crazy. The time has flown by. I must say that last fiscal year was my favorite so far, and we'll see why that is in a minute. So just I'll get into that. I've got good news, more so to build off what Paul just said. The numbers that we're presenting carry us up to November 30th, 2024. That's our year-end date. So the good news is we did have a strong financial year at Living Lakes, and the reason for that is, in my opinion, is because of our team, and really the financial management of the team as a whole is a complete team effort. It's not just me, it's our program managers. One of the reasons why this was a great year was because of the input from our program managers and the ownership that they take over the finances. It makes my job a lot easier. That being said, this was also a challenging year for Living Lakes financially, because we sort of look at a funding landscape. It was actually the first year. This was our 8th fiscal year, so we've now had 8 audits and 8 sets of audited financial statements since becoming a registered charity in 2017. I thought it was interesting to note that this was our first year that our funding was less than it was the previous year. And that's not like an alarming thing or anything like that. It's just interesting to note. We don't expect infinite growth. We're not a Fortune 500 company. But I do think it's interesting. And because of that, it led to some difficult decisions at the executive level, at the board level, and conversations, which were all part of the challenges and as part of our financial story this year. I always say that good finance presentations don't present numbers, they present stories. So with that, I'll share my screen and get into our story this year. And I like to start by looking at this little graph right here, which is it just kind of shows how the organization has grown. I mean, there's lots of different ways to show how an organization is growing, but I'm a finance person, so this is how I choose to look at it. But you can see through the years 16, 17, 17, 18, we're at 400,000, up to this last completed fiscal year, 3.2 million, and you can see sort of the little drop off that I mentioned. To spice this graph up a little bit. Sorry. Okay, one of my slides didn't really work. That's okay. Oh, there it is. All right, good. You can sort of see the growth of the organization here through over the years. We launched the Water Hub in 2021, the FIMP Indigenous Knowledge and Values Framework in 2021, Columbia Basin Water Monitoring Framework 2022. All of that, of course, driving our funding up to groundwater expansion in 2023, which is going to be part of the presentation in a couple of minutes, which is why I like to highlight that part. By the way, I was going to mention how I was going to, on this graph, I was going to put all the Living Lake staff there. I started to do that, but I'm not that much of a Canva wizard, so I just left my own name in there. I did think it was funnier that way. So anyways, getting into this most recently completed year, this was our funding picture. We raised 3.23 million this past year, 52% of which come from government sources, 32% from foundations, and 10% from other sources, which is like fee-for-service activity, as well as wage subsidies and interest, 4% from corporate, and 1.5% from individual donations. Our expenses, same as in previous years, the monitoring framework is our gets the majority of our resources at 42%. The Lakes team is at 22, and that would be like our FIMP program and our Lake Blitz program. Rivers and tributaries, just under 16. Those are things like our biomonitoring program and restoration projects. Groundwater right here is interesting at 5.6% because we expect this piece of pie to go up for the future year because we've had some expansion there and some successful fundraising on that project that'll be covered in our presentation coming up. The administration is at 10.7% and fundraising at 5.1%, which is all in line with nonprofit standards. We feel good about those numbers. So to get into the actual audited statements, the first one here, I'm not going to go through all these numbers, but I'll mention a few ones that I think are important. So the first one I start with is total assets, which is 3.8 million currently versus just over 5 million last year. So financially, the organization is smaller this fiscal year end than it was last year, and the reason for that is we're spending out our project funds that we were sort of pre-funded for. So we at the end of the 2023 year, we had a lot of liquid assets, a lot of cash, and term deposit. That's just a bond that we hold to make a little bit of interest, and those numbers are going down as we spend out that money and direct it towards our programs. The other number that I like to look at on the balance sheet is net assets down here. It's 785,000 currently, and that's sort of like what I like to call our emergency fund or rainy day fund. It's a pot of money that is there to weather uncertainties, and we can sort of draw on it as needed. 785,000 is currently about 20 to 30% of our operating budget, which is actually a little bit on the low end of what the industry standard would consider healthy. Still, it's something that we can sort of take comfort in that we have it. Not all organizations have it, and we always sort of keep our eye on that as we're budgeting for the next year and future years. The last statement is the statement of revenue and expenditures, which is our profit and loss report. As I said, our revenues are down from the previous year. Funnily enough, they're actually up in all the subcategories under revenues except for government, where we're down, but we're up on private foundation funding, we're up on industry and corporation, we're up on donations and individual donations as well. Our expenses are stable year over year. With respect to our expenses, 90% of Living Lakes expenses are people costs, and that comes in two forms, through salaries and wages and through professional fees. So all of our contractors and consultants that work on our programs. The last number I wanted to point to on the profit and loss is the bottom line, which for the year is at -20. So we run a deficit this year. It's the second year in a row we're in a deficit position. It's just worth pointing out. It shows that we're in need of more funding and to continue to do our work, and we're also spending out some of our surpluses that we recognized in earlier years. We worked with an accounting firm, Quinlan, Bowl & Barrett, on this audit this year, so I just wanted to thank them for their work, and I also wanted to thank the team for putting this together, and that is the end of my presentation.
Thanks, Brian. Are there any questions with regards to the financial reports before we make a motion to accept them? I'll just scan the chat and look for hands. Paul? Paul, did you have a question?
No, just, I thought you were looking for, I didn't realize you were looking for questions. I thought you
Oh,
were
sorry. Yeah.
looking for approval.
No, we're looking for approval now. So if we can get a motion to accept the audited financials as stated by Brian. So
Well,
Paul Bach is
Gonna
the,
make a motion, yeah, to make the
okay,
audited.
And I'll second it, Laura.
and Laura is seconding. Awesome. All those in favor? And motion is carried. So now is the point where we need to carry out some re-election of directors. Before we do this, I just would like to take this opportunity to thank Mandy McRobbie for her role on the board. She is stepping down due to increasing and changing family commitments. Mandy's been a really thoughtful presence with a wealth of experience in the NGO world, and Living Lakes and me as board chair has certainly benefited from her experience. So Mandy, I really thank you for your time and hope that the changing family life stuff goes really well for you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you to the entire board. It's been an absolute honor and privilege to be served with all of you, and I really appreciate all that I've learned from you guys. Thank you so much.
This year, we have 4 directors who are currently halfway through their 2-year term, and so they don't have to be reelected. That's Laura Bell, who's been on the board since 2020, Scott Meakin, who's been on the board since 2022, Ann Muter since 2023, and Devin, who's been on since 2023 as well. Standing for re-election are 3 directors, Dr. Paul Bach, who's been on the boards since inception, 2017, Liz Hendricks since 2023, and Ramsha Ahmed since 2023. And voting members would have received some of the write-ups and bios of the directors that need to be re-elected. So if I could get a motion to re-elect Paul Bach, Liz Hendricks, Ramsha Ahmed as directors for a new 2-year term.
I'll make that motion. It's Scott.
Okay,
I'll second it. Mandy?
Andy, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Yeah. Motion is carried. And also at this point, I would like to introduce you to your new chair, who is going to be Laura Bell, starting after this meeting. And Devin Anderson is going to be the new vice chair, Scott Meakin, the new treasurer, and Ann Muter, who will be our secretary. And I'll just hand over to Laura.
So I just wanted to take a few minutes as the going vice chair and the incoming chair to thank Jane and Mandy, and also Jen Teberge, who retired a year ago, for their outstanding commitment and contribution to the board and to Living Lakes Canada. Jane has, as you know, from the beginning, led us skillfully and passionately as the board chair, to where we are now. And all of us are very grateful for that. And Mandy and Jen have also contributed masterfully and professionally to the board. We have a very, I think, very high functioning and professional and talented board now. And a lot of that is due to the efforts of Jane and Mandy and Jen. So I just wanted to express our appreciation. The board does have a gift for all 3 of you, but it's very hard to present on Zoom. So hopefully it will be coming your way in the very near future. So anyway, I just really, really wanted from the bottom of my heart to thank all 3 of you, because it's been, as Mandy said, a pleasure and an honor to have worked with all of you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Laura. I will now hand over to Kat to deliver the Executive Director report.
Great, thanks, Jane. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. So I'm just going to run through the highlights of last year. Bear with me, it'll take about 10 minutes. So good evening and welcome, and thank you for attending the AGM. Living Lakes Canada works to protect and restore freshwater ecosystems through community-based water monitoring, data management, education, and outreach. Our team of dedicated, value-driven professionals work across BC, Alberta, the Yukon, and other regions of Canada to support watershed health and water security. We are deeply grateful to our volunteer board, expert advisors, our partners and funders who make this work possible. Looking back on 2024, the scope of our work can be grouped into 3 themes. The first theme is strengthening water stewardship through Indigenous partnerships. Living Lakes Canada programs are guided by the objectives of the First Nations on whose territories we operate. We elevate opportunities for applied reconciliation through community-focused water security solutions. In Alberta, we are partnered with the Old Man Watershed Council, and with guidance from the Piikani Nation Lands Department, we have co-developed a regionally tailored groundwater initiative. And you'll hear more about the groundwater programming later in the evening. The local Indigenous knowledge and values framework we co-developed with the Upper Nicola Band to assess lake foreshore values through a non-colonial lens was field tested on Nicola and Douglas Lake over the past 2 years. The outcome is a holistic relationship-based lake foreshore management model, which has been requested to be developed and applied in other regions with other nations in BC and Ontario. The Columbia Basin Water Monitoring Network continues to operate with First Nations guidance and participation. Our youth engagement programs provided mentorship and training opportunities for young Indigenous water stewards wishing to deepen their understanding about their waterways. In the Yukon, we supported lake monitoring discussions and helped to organize Celebrating the Lakes, a gathering that brought together representatives from 9 Yukon and Northern BC Indigenous groups. The second theme is building water literacy through storytelling and engagement. It is important for people in our communities to understand the relevance of water monitoring, which is why we use media as a tool to elevate community voices, increase water literacy, and to raise awareness that drives actions for water stewardship. In 2024, we had 350 articles across Canadian media platforms, which serve to amplify the climate and water issues we all face. Our National Lake Blitz continues to resonate with the public, drawing hundreds of citizen scientists into active observation and reporting on their local lakes. Last year, the Lake Blitz volunteers monitored 220 lakes across 11 provinces and territories, with over 25,000 observations submitted, now totaling 53,000 lake observations since the program's inception. We supported a number of youth engagement initiatives with approximately 1,000 youth and young adults. Activities included hands-on training and monitoring, water-themed art, community events, and storytelling, featuring youth as both contributors and leaders in this space. The third theme is supporting climate resilience through community-based water monitoring. A study published in Science Journal this April revealed that a remarkable amount of Earth's water stored on land has been depleted. The study finds that over the past 2 decades, global warming has notably reduced the amount of water that's being stored around the world in soil, lakes, rivers, snow, and other places by approximately 2,000 gigatons, which surpasses Greenland's ice loss over a similar time frame, and with potentially irreversible impacts on agriculture and sea level rise. As these global water challenges intensify, water literacy and water stewardship at the local levels is where we can still be impactful. In 2024, our Columbia Basin Water Monitoring Network operated 118 monitoring sites. This included groundwater, tributaries, lakes, and climate stations, many of which are monitored in partnership with other groups to provide more comprehensive watershed data. We've increased tributary hydrometric monitoring by 112% and increased groundwater monitoring in this region by more than 450% since the program started. The 2024 marked the first full year of data collection for 29 new hydrometric lake and wetland level monitoring sites. We then launched the Watershed Bulletin series to showcase real-world application of the water data collected while supporting decision makers on ways water data collected, on ways to integrate this information into community climate adaptation strategies. The Columbia Basin Water Monitoring Network was highlighted as a case study in a special issue of Water International, a scientific journal focused on water management in water basins around the world. And many of the studies that I'm referring to, the links are going to be in the chat. I think Nicole's put them in there. Okay. Also in April of this year, the world's largest insurance companies, Allianz, warned of further economic destabilization because essential financial services, such as insurance and mortgages, are becoming unviable due to increasing frequency and severity of extreme weather events. Once again, in the face of continuous global warnings, practical community-driven solutions remain both essential, but are also very tangible for us to implement. A notable success last year was the wildfire suppression water mapping project in the community of Argenta, and Jane referenced this as well. In partnership with the Argenta Safety and Preparedness Society, the project mapped water access points and projected flows, high-pressure standpipes, in-stream pump deployment sites, and water supply access routes. Comprehensive digital maps were created and made available to wildfire professionals. When the town of Argenta was threatened by wildfires in July of last year, BC wildfire crews were able to use these mapping products, thereby speeding up response time, eliminating field reconnaissance delays, and helping to prevent major losses. Subsequently, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities across the Columbia Basin have requested support to proactively implement similar mapping. The model will now be expanded to Grasmere, Yakitak-Nakliet First Nation, Red Mountain, and Winlaw. Our team efforts were once again recognized in 2024. We were selected by the Environmental Studies Association of Canada as a second-place ECO Award recipient for our contribution to the field of environmental studies, with a focus on the Columbia Basin Water Monitoring Framework, which was selected as a finalist by the Real Estate Foundation 2024 Land Award Freshwater category as well. We were also selected as a featured partner in 1% of the Planet's Freshwater Ecosystem Partner Guide. And now at this time, I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to Jane for her 7 years of dedicated leadership. I can't believe it's been 7 years. Oh my gosh. And Mandy, you as well for your invaluable contributions as a board member. And that you're both stepping down is sad for us, but I was so grateful for your ability to support the vision and the work of our organization. So I really appreciate that. And also Jen's as well. And I know she stepped down last year. So yeah, thank you so much for your guidance and support and for your commitment and dedication and faith and leadership. And we wouldn't have been able to do it without you, and we wouldn't be here today without you. So really, really, truly grateful. So thank you.
Thank you, Kat.
Okay, so looking ahead, the ever-increasing frequency of drought and wildfire continues to expose gaps in our collective response to watershed health and community resilience. But within those challenges lay great opportunities to share data, break down silos, and co-develop solutions across sectors. An example of this is the upcoming Without Water Symposium, co-hosted by Yakitak-Nakliet First Nation, the Elk River Alliance, and Living Lakes Canada. This gathering will bring together Indigenous elders and knowledge holders, scientists, local experts, and decision makers to explore the knowledge and values required for land and water stewardship in a changing climate. Hosted in the Elk River watershed, the event will help identify the steps necessary for paradigm shifts to increase community adaptation options through improved watershed health and security. So, in closing, there is no question that our water challenges are becoming more urgent. We have much work to do in our collective efforts to protect fresh water for food security, ecosystem services, and for the well-being of generations to come. We are extremely grateful for our team, partners, and funders who bring innovation, care, and optimism to help us meet these challenges. Thank you. So I'll pass it back to Jane, I think.
Thanks, Kat. All the work that Kat discussed in her report, as well as the financials by Paul and Brian, are bundled into that impact report. And it's actually a pretty cool read. So I think Nicole's added it to the chat, and when you get a chance, have a scan. I would now like to introduce Emily Jerome to present our feature presentation this evening, Beneath the Surface, Mobilizing Communities for Watershed Resilience from the Ground Up.
All right, thank you, Jane. So in this presentation, we'll be diving into the vital role of groundwater and the work that Living Lakes Canada is doing to support the sustainable management of this freshwater source. Community-based monitoring is at the core of Living Lakes' mission and mandate. And as we heard in Kat's Executive Director report, our team supports a wide range of monitoring activities across watersheds. In this special presentation, we're really shining a spotlight on our groundwater monitoring efforts with a focus on 2 community-driven initiatives currently underway in the Columbia Basin of British Columbia and Southwest Alberta. And so, yeah, my name is Emily Jerome, and I'm the Outreach and Communications Coordinator with Living Lakes based in Canmore, Alberta. I'll also be inviting 2 other team members to speak about their respective work on these projects. Braden Toyka is the Water Monitoring Coordinator based out of Invermere, BC. He assists in the development and coordination of our groundwater and hydrometric monitoring programs, including the maintenance of 7 groundwater, 14 surface water, and 2 climate monitoring stations within our monitoring network in the East Kootenays. As well, we will have Anne-Marie Lefebvre, and she is the Alberta Groundwater Program Coordinator based in Lethbridge, Alberta. She supports the growth of this new initiative by engaging local communities across southern Alberta and coordinating with project partners to work towards implementing this groundwater monitoring network. And so this is just a brief overview of what to expect in this featured presentation. We will be closing with a Q&A, so please save your questions to the end or enter them into the chat as we go, and we will come back to them. Living Lakes Canada is an award-winning charitable water science and stewardship NGO with over 20 years of experience working with Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities to protect fresh water. Our mission is to facilitate collaboration in monitoring, restoration, and policy development initiatives for the long-term protection of lakes, rivers, wetlands, and watersheds in Canada. We collaborate with hundreds of diverse partners and have been recognized by the federal government as a leading example of best practices in community-based ecological monitoring in Canada. And so because knowing how groundwater systems work is key to understanding why groundwater monitoring matters, let's take a step back and ground ourselves in some basics. So groundwater is an often overlooked water source in the watershed, despite it really being a lifeline for both communities and ecosystems. It exists beneath our feet in many different aquifers, which are natural underground reservoirs within layers of sand, gravel, or rock. And not all aquifers are the same. Some store water for weeks, while others store it for decades, centuries, or even millennia. And as a result, how quickly they recharge after we withdraw water changes from aquifer to aquifer. And many are connected to surface water, like we can see in this graph here, meaning that changes in groundwater may impact the quantity and quality of surface water sources and vice versa. So if an aquifer is depleted, it could lead to lower water levels in nearby rivers. Likewise, if a river runs dry, it may no longer recharge that aquifer that it's connected to. Groundwater is a crucial source of fresh water for domestic, agricultural, industrial, and commercial purposes. It can help maintain surface water levels and is essential for supporting healthy ecosystems, including habitat for fish, waterfowl, and other wildlife. And so careful management and allocation of groundwater is becoming increasingly important as populations continue to grow, demands increase, and pressures such as climate change intensify. And so when it comes to groundwater, the expression, you can't manage what you don't measure, is especially relevant. And as the climate continues to change, we're seeing more frequent droughts, floods, wildfires, and rising air and water temperatures across Canada. As of April 1st, the BC Snow Survey shows that our snowpack is about 21% below normal. And in southern Alberta, it's a very similar story with snowpack levels well below average. And this really points to a higher risk of drought as we head into spring and summer, which impacts water levels in those streams, creeks, rivers, wetlands, and lakes. And with surface water supplies becoming less reliable, the importance of groundwater gets magnified, because one of the big challenges we face is that we still don't fully understand how groundwater systems work, which makes it hard to manage and allocate this resource sustainably. And that's where water monitoring comes in. The data that Living Lakes collects through our community-based monitoring programs provides the information needed to help communities adapt to these changes and make better decisions for the future. And with all of that in mind, let's shift to our first featured initiative, the Columbia Basin Groundwater Monitoring Program. This program has now built up over 8 years of data and is a comprehensive resource for understanding groundwater trends in the region. And so to tell you more about this program, how it works, and some of the highlights of its key achievements, I will pass it over to Braden.
Thanks, Emily. So yeah, to get started here, I'd like to acknowledge that this program takes place on the traditional territories of the Ktunaxa, Secwepemc, Sinixt, and Syilx nations. So the Columbia Basin Groundwater Monitoring Program started as a pilot back in 2013, focused on collecting groundwater data in the Invermere area. Since then, it's grown significantly, expanding across the Columbia Basin, and has now resulted in a 450% increase in groundwater monitoring across the region. The main goals of our groundwater monitoring program are to track groundwater levels at volunteer observation wells within our network to understand seasonal and long-term trends. We then share this data publicly with local governments and water users to inform sustainable water management, with the main goal being to increase groundwater knowledge and build water literacy within communities. So our program partners with First Nations, local governments, and private well owners who all volunteer their wells for monitoring, and the well owners are often engaged in the data collection itself. At these volunteer observation wells, we install and maintain water level data loggers, which collect hourly water level measurements. The data collected is then reviewed and analyzed for quality assurance, and is then shared publicly on Living Lakes Canada's Columbia Basin Water Hub, which is an open database that houses diverse water data on streams, groundwater, lakes, wetlands, glaciers, climate, and more. Our data is also shared on the BC provincial government's real-time water data website. And this groundwater program is a model that can be adapted and replicated in other regions. Its success is what led to the expansion of this approach into southern Alberta, and you'll hear more about that from Anne-Marie in a little bit here. So as part of Living Lakes' broader mission to prioritize applied reconciliation through collaborative water stewardship, this program works to integrate Indigenous knowledge with Western science by partnering with regional First Nations. We are currently working with Akum and Yakatiganuklit First Nation on collaborative groundwater monitoring through this program. This figure on the right here, it shows an overview of the long-term groundwater observation wells with publicly available data within the Columbia Basin currently. And as you can see, the province of BC currently operates 7 volunteer observation wells throughout the extent of the Columbia Basin as part of their provincial observation well network. That's shown by the blue circles on the map. And Living Lakes Canada's groundwater monitoring program works to complement this network and to fill in data gaps by monitoring 32 active volunteer observation wells within the region, And that's shown by the purple circles that you can see in the figure there. So next here, let's take a look at one example from our data. This graph shows groundwater levels from volunteer observation well 10, and it's located in Windermere in the East Kootenays, with the main water users of this aquifer being private residences. So the graph shows how water levels in the well have changed over time, and each colored line represents a different year, with different shades of blue representing water levels between 2018 and 2021. And the more reddish lines representing water levels in the last 3 years from 2022 to 2024. So based off of this graph here, you can see that groundwater levels naturally rise and fall throughout the year, and also that there's a clear downward trend in this graph at this well over time. So the bright red line at the bottom of the graph tells us that in 2024, the well's groundwater levels reached an all-time low since our monitoring began. And also that over the past 6 to 7 years, groundwater levels in this well have dropped by about 1.5 meters. This kind of long-term decline really highlights the importance of continued monitoring and awareness. Living Lakes circulated an online survey last spring to gather public insights and concerns about groundwater in the Columbia Basin. The survey revealed that 88% of respondents were concerned or very concerned about groundwater, with drinking water and ecosystem health being the top concerns. This feedback played a key role in building support for our aquifer vulnerability assessment to provide a more comprehensive understanding of the challenges facing groundwater and guide actions needed to address them. With support from the province of British Columbia, the Columbia Basin Trust, and RBC Tech for Nature, Living Lakes commissioned the aquifer assessment and recently co-hosted a webinar with the Kootenay and Boundary Farm advisors to share preliminary results from that assessment. This event saw 100 people tune in, and we'll drop the link to the timestamp recording of that webinar in the chat for anyone interested. And more details on the aquifer assessment will be made available in an upcoming Watershed bulletin that will be shared with our mailing list in the early summer. So above and beyond all the program's activities we've discussed so far, we also offer groundwater workshops for Selkirk College and College of the Rockies students. And this gives them hands-on experience with monitoring techniques and monitoring tools. And then lastly, to wrap up the section, I'd like to share a quote that highlights the value of the monitoring work we're doing and showcases one of the many ways that communities are using the data. This feedback comes from Chuck Pronk. He's a public works foreman with the village of Canal Flats, and we work with him to monitor their local well in the village. He said that the groundwater level data that Living Lakes Canada has helped us collect has been very useful to us. We use the data to estimate the groundwater levels in the surrounding area at different times of the year. We also recently completed a groundwater at risk of containing pathogens or GARP assessment, and the data was useful for that. Just knowing the trends over the last few years has been useful knowledge for us. Looking ahead, we're going to continue monitoring in our network of volunteer observation wells, with the goal being to gain a better understanding of groundwater in the Columbia Basin and to contribute valuable data to support informed freshwater management. So with that, I'll now pass it over to Anne-Marie to speak some more about the Alberta groundwater program.
Thank you, Braden. As mentioned before, my name is Anne-Marie and I'm the Alberta Groundwater Program Coordinator. Living Lakes Canada acknowledges that this program's activities are taking place on Treaty 7 territory, which is the traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Tsuut'ina Nation, and Stoney Nakoda Nations, as well as the chosen home of the Foothills Métis District 1. Specifically within the Old Man Watershed, we recognize that the local Blackfoot communities of Pagani and Kainai. The Alberta Groundwater Program is a two-year pilot in the Oldman Watershed and was launched last summer. Seeing the success of our groundwater monitoring work in the Columbia Basin, the Oldman Watershed Council invited us to collaborate and apply our methods in southern Alberta. Currently, the government of Alberta operates about 306 groundwater observation wells across the province. 13 of those are in the Oldman Watershed. This program aims to increase the total number of monitored wells, which will complement the provincial network. As a replicated model, the Alberta Groundwater Program shares the same objectives and approach as the Columbia Basin Groundwater Monitoring Program that Braden just talked about. These objectives will include collecting groundwater level data, identifying trends, sharing information publicly, and building groundwater literacy. This program uses the same site selection process as the Columbia Basin Groundwater Monitoring Program, which forms the backbone of the project and makes it an innovative approach to monitoring. Site selection will be guided by both scientific factors and community priorities. Using existing wells, the program will start by implementing 9 volunteer observation wells in 3 community clusters, with 1 cluster located on the Piikani First Nation lands. So although the Alberta Groundwater Program has been developed with the Oldman Watershed Council, components of the program are guided by the Piikani Nation lands monitoring priorities and needs in order to support Indigenous leadership in groundwater management. Last fall, BGC Engineering, based out of Calgary, used an advanced geoscanning technology called the Towed Transient Electromagnetic System, otherwise known as TTEM. We used this method to scan and map subsurface features in the Oldman Watershed. TTEM technology helps identify potential aquifers quickly and cost-effectively, while also ground-truthing groundwater data collected through traditional methods. Although the use of TTEM technology is currently unique to the Alberta Groundwater Program, we are planning to integrate this aspect to the Columbia Basin in partnership with the Yakit Akutnilit First Nations in the near future. Over this past winter, a data gap analysis and an aquifer vulnerability assessment was also completed for the Oldman Watershed. The data gap analysis identified areas where additional groundwater monitoring is needed, and the aquifer vulnerability assessment helped pinpoint priority aquifers. Community outreach is ongoing, and I'll dive into that shortly. As you now know, community outreach is a key part of this project. We've invited residents across southern Alberta to get involved through a variety of channels, and this slide shows a snapshot of those efforts. A project launch webinar last summer featuring speakers from Alberta Parks and Environment and the University of Calgary was followed by a series of community meetings in early 2025. We hosted 2 in-person meetings, one in Pincher Creek and the other in Lethbridge, and a third one online. Together, these sessions saw over 80 participants. We also encourage participants to complete an online survey to gather local concerns and priorities, and we have collected over 130 responses to date from that survey. So if you're joining us from Southern Alberta today, we will be sharing the link for that survey in the chat so that you can complete it after this event. And then you can also find the survey on our website. And finally, to expand our reach, we ran meta ads promoting the events, which reached over 27,000 people across Southern Alberta. Here, you see a word cloud visualizing the key concerns raised by participants in the surveys completed so far. The larger the word, the more frequently it has been selected as an area of concern as it relates to groundwater. So we see here that drinking water is the #1 concern, followed by food security and agriculture. And here we see a quote from an anonymous participant emphasizing the importance of implementing this groundwater monitoring program. This participant said, "We are very concerned about the water quality and quantity in the Olmed watershed. Several years of drought, reduction in snowpack, questionable water allocations, and the returning threat of coal mining in the headwaters amplifies the concern of water quality and quantity." So once the sites for the volunteer observation wells are selected and equipment such as water level sensors and data loggers are installed, we will be hosting groundwater monitoring workshops for well owners and interested community members who will be helping monitor the wells as part of the program. As data is collected, it will be shared with First Nations, government, and the public. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Emily.
Thank you, Anne-Marie and Braden, for sharing more about these programs. To close, I'd like to share a quote from our Executive Director, Kat Hartwig, who you heard from earlier. Her words really capture what Living Lakes and all of our staff are trying to accomplish. It's by building local capacity and increasing water literacy that we can work to empower communities in their efforts to protect their freshwater sources. Community resilience at the local level is an essential first line of defense. So thank you everyone for staying tuned for the featured presentation, and we hope that you enjoyed learning a bit more about these groundwater programs. And now I will be handing it back over to Jane to help host the Q&A.
You're
Jane,
muted.
I think you're muted.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks, Braden and Anne-Marie and Emily. I love the groundwater program. I find it such a tangible thing. And I just, if there are people who have specific questions for any of the three presenters, you can either raise your hand or write it in the chat box.
Paul. I'm Paul.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Okay, I mean, it's phenomenal how much of the measuring you're doing and you're providing the communities with the measurements. But have you got examples of what the communities are actually doing about these results? Once they get the result that the aquifer's lowering or whatever it is, have you got lots of examples of them actually saying, okay, because of that, we're now going to do this? Or is it just they're just soaking up this information and not sure really what to do with it? That's my question.
Yeah, I can speak to one example of that. So for most of this groundwater level data, we need like multiple years of data to see trends that we can expect to continue in the future. So at some of our wells, we do have just multiple years of data. One example would be the Windermere well that I showed in my presentation there. We're seeing declining trends by like getting close to 2 meters over the last 7 years now. And there's examples in the community of wells like almost going dry. So with speaking to people in the community there's definitely concern, and when they have this data available, they're able to do more to protect that resource and like more sustainably manage it. So it's mostly just raising awareness for the community and then leaving it up to the community and the government to do what they will with the data that we raise, pretty much.
Have you got any examples of what they actually do?
Nothing specifically yet that I can think of.
Right.
Carol, does anything come to mind from you there? Carol's our data manager and field operations manager with Living Lakes.
Yeah, hi, Carol here. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yeah, we've been monitoring as Braden and Emily suggested. We've got now multiple years of data for several of our wells, which is exciting. I think in terms of data use, Braden definitely highlighted that awareness to the community is impacting community members in terms of conservation measures and thinking about their water, what's happening, and gives them data to move forward with actions. We now also have all of the Columbia Basin groundwater monitoring data on the provincial government portal, and it's being accessed by consultants who generally do the scientific reports to support local government who make those decisions. So now that we have the data, we're just starting to see the data being referenced in those reports. So one example is recently the Columbia Shuswap Regional District completed a water availability study for the community of Blayberry. And they referenced, in order to understand what's happening in that area, because there's no wells being monitored, they referenced data from one of the volunteer observation wells in the Columbia Basin program. So where we're seeing traction is use of the data in reports that are commissioned by local government or potentially provincial government who have the jurisdiction to make water allocation decisions. And so those decisions, those decisions come based out of reports, and those reports are starting to use the data. So Braden also referenced the groundwater at risk of pathogens report that was done for Canal Flats. I believe there's one underway as well for the District of Invermere right now. So they're, the consultants really are the folks who need to have the data in their hands because they're writing the reports for these local communities or water supply system operators. So it's exciting that we're seeing traction there.
Paul?
Yeah, I was just curious, with regards to your data, you said it's dropped about a meter or something in that Windermere well. So I'm just wondering, is that how significant is that? Is the aquifer depth 100 meters or is it 3 meters? Because a 1 meter drop is significant, obviously, if it's just a few meters. So how do we know how significant that drop is in the big picture?
Yeah, and that really has to be done on a case-by-case basis. So an aquifer, a study that potentially could be done is looking at what are all the depths of the wells in that area and what is the risk of the wells going dry. And so we're at a point now with the program where additional analysis are going to be needed to understand what is significant, because a 2 meter drop in one community may not be significant, whereas a meter drop in another may be. And that's where you need additional information. So the groundwater level data is one piece of the puzzle. We have to understand the water going in and the water going out. So what we've done is we've collected the data. If you think of it in terms of a bank balance, what we've done is we've collected the primary information of what is the bank balance in these areas, what is the level of groundwater. The next step is to understand the dynamics, understand where is the water coming from, where is it coming in from, and where is it going out. Then we can understand why is the bank balance changing and what needs to be done to protect it. And so we're at a point now where we're generating the information on the bank balances, and the next step is to understand why are those changing and in which areas, you know, which areas are priorities to understand that. And that's where some of the work that Living Lakes did on the aquifer prioritization and looking at, you know, with limited resources, where should the resources for analysis be spent?
Just further to that, I guess I agree with Paul Bell, you know, sort of saying, well, what changes have we seen happen? And you say, well, people are, the data's out there and people can pick it up and they're starting to put it in their reports. And as we get more data, as we learn how that data, as you just talked about, what's affecting it and the outcomes and sort of the projection of what's going to happen with water. And this goes to you, to all of the program managers, to the executive director. Is there increasingly now a role for Living Lakes Canada to become more advocates to say, well, look at, this is what's happening with the water, we need to do something. Because right now it feels like we're saying, this is what's happening with the water, there's the data, do what you like with it. And so I'm just wondering if we, as we go forward and collect all this data, and we're the people that hold the knowledge, and yourself, Carol, really understand this, if we now need to start making recommendations and advocating more for people to actually do something, because they may not know what to do.
I could speak to that briefly. Braden touched on our series of watershed bulletins, and that's exactly the intention of that communication series, is to provide decision makers with a bit more context for the data, help them to interpret it and apply it to their own purposes. So we are working towards that and trying to help people apply this data towards decision making, working with a number of local governments on climate adaptation plans and things like that, and helping them to integrate the data into their day-to-day decision making and processes.
Do you think we need to be more advocates to actually get out there, and rather than just helping people say, look, if you got to do something, there's a real problem here. So there's a difference between supporting people in their decision making and actually getting out and saying, we're developing a crisis here, something needs to be done, and bringing more attention to it. It's just a question. I'm not saying we should do that, but I do wonder if we need to look at our role here.
Well, I mean, Paul, I'll speak to that, because I think that's in part why we are co-hosting the Without Water Symposium with the Akatagnakat and the Elk Valley group, because there is an issue of water supply. And the challenge with that is we're cognizant of that, but I don't think our policies have caught up to understanding the impact of climate to our water supply. And so that conversation needs to be had. We talk about shifting paradigms, we talk about local water tables, and we talk about more progressive ways of addressing this situation, where I feel like we're at this precipice where we don't necessarily have those policies in place, but we need to shift quite quickly to address the water security issues at a local level from a drought perspective. So, and the other thing that we're told by hydrologists is that to get trends of water data, you need about 10 years. But if you have flash droughts, 10 years isn't going to work for us. You know, we need to address it now. So I feel like we're addressing that on multiple fronts. And I think that we still are advocacy oriented to some degree. Yeah.
Are we at a point where, with the data that we have, can we say, okay, this aquifer can handle 10 cows or 10 wells or whatever, and be able to make a statement like that with what we've got? Carol or Braden?
Yeah. But I just want to say, Jane, that, and I'll let them answer because it might be more technical, but that's in part why we're doing aquifer vulnerability studies, you know, to understand what carrying capacity is and to make sure that we understand recharge rates so that we don't pump out aquifers to do irrigation for you know, alfalfa for cows. But it's super complicated and each aquifer is different. But I'll let the groundwater folks speak to that, but that's exactly right, you know. And we just need to be a little bit more proactive on it. And we've been told this for the last 30 years. We're 30 years late in collecting the data. I mean, we were told by the Pacific Climate Change Consortium years ago that we're in data arrears to allow for proper adaptation in our communities.
It's when I see developments being proposed for 100 glamping places, I think, what about our groundwater? Where does that come in the in the mix? It'd be lovely for the consultants to be able to say, look, we've got that evidence, it can't handle it.
Yeah, and I think that that's part of those financial things that come into play where you're not going to get mortgages, you're not going to get financing unless you can demonstrate sustainable water supply and show you're not building on a floodplain and show you're not building in a fire-prone area. So I think these things are shifting. I think the level of which they shift, like California, massive shift. East Kootenays, yeah, we're feeling it, but just in pockets, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Any other questions? I haven't looked in the chat. Hold on a sec.
Yeah, Jane, there's another question in the chat, but it looks like Kat has responded to it, but I'll read it out regardless, just so everyone can hear. This is Don Peel. Thank you for your question. And Don says the Alberta government had a provincial public outreach survey on water resources last year. Sand and gravel extraction is an activity that has a potential of impacting water resources. Is there a report of the public feedback, and was there any policy change based on the input? And so, Kat, did you want to quickly speak to what your response is?
Well, no, basically that I didn't know, but that the question is a good one, and so we'd certainly love to find out more about that. And that's something that, thanks for raising that, Don. It's not something that we'd considered, and there is a lot of gravel extraction, and it certainly would have impact. So you've referenced surveys and reports that I think we'd like to dig into and find out, just to inform our own Alberta water programming.
Any other questions? I think. So there will be a video link of the proceedings, and email addresses of all the presenters are going to be sent to the attendees of the meeting. I really appreciate everybody attending tonight. And
Jane, it looks like we have another question from Christina.
Oh, yes, Christina, go ahead.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be joining this organization. I'm chair of the Sturgeon River Watershed Alliance, which is 17 municipalities that are working really hard to understand our watershed and the things that we do to it. And I'm also was on the executive of the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance. And I think what I find intriguing, and I'm hoping that there might be some thought about having a linkage to all the work that all of these organizations are undertaking, because we're spending a lot of money studying, understanding. I am also a municipal councillor, and I have worked really hard to understand all of this because I live in the Beverly Aquifer. I have 3 sump pumps in my house. And 100 feet away, people don't have water. So water's intriguing. It's totally intriguing to me. And it would be really great if there was some way to have, a national collective of these studies, because we learn a lot from them. Even in our own watershed, we're doing monitoring, we're doing groundwater. We have a person on the chair of the NSWA who works for EPCOR, and she knows where every drop of water comes to EPCOR so that it can provide water to 1.5 million people. So there's so many people in this space. And I just kind of feel like because we're not linked better, we're maybe missing some really good opportunities to say, well, we've seen this in the Okanagan, we've seen this in Similkameen, we've seen this in Parkland County. We can start, I think, tell a really impactful story you know, and I look at, for instance, I was on the wastewater commission. Water and sewer are my thing. And we had the announcement of air products, huge, I don't know, it was $1.6 billion project. EPCOR couldn't give them the water. They could not do it. So we, as a sewage facility, we figured out how we could actually recycle water, which is really amazing. And then we have another announcement 3 months later, and they're going to take, we're building a new $200 million wastewater facility. And this new facility, Dow Chemicals, is going to take 25% of the capacity. No one has looked at what the water and sewer impacts of those are. And particularly to the water, like how do you feed some of these plants? And it's really awesome. Everybody loves these major projects, but the fragile water network, I'm not sure what its capacity is. And I'm wondering some way to have less fractured relationships between the groups. And
Do you want to
fractures,
move
maybe
to
not the word
the
words.
Do you want to move to the East Kootenays? We need somebody like you.
I love the East
Council.
Kootenays. I used to live in Chilliwack.
Somebody.
Yeah. So when I joined this, I was thinking, okay, this is the place where, or an organization, because their title is Living Lakes Canada, could maybe have that opportunity to meld so much of this great learnings across the country.
Sounds like
that's my soapbox.
Yeah, so it sounds like Paige, maybe you have connected before you had written in the chat.
That was in response to a separate question.
Oh, that was okay. Sorry, Kat, would you like to just
Yeah,
comment?
I mean, I'm hearing you loud and clear, and it's a really good question, and we need to share best practices, particularly with small municipalities across the country, because we don't want to be reinventing the wheel. We're all strapped for time and money, and to have that platform and venue to do that would be necessary and amazing. But I wonder if the Canadian Water Agency shouldn't take that type of a role. I don't know, but it's a conversation that we're pursuing, you know, in the UBC municipal conversations at the annual meetings. I don't know where else they're being pursued, and Liz is on the call. She might have more information about that. But yeah, I just feel like yeah, it's that silo breaking and building economies of scale and sharing those best practices. And I don't know what the best venue for that is, because certainly other municipal governments have had similar experiences. And so then how do we field those questions that you posed in terms of cost benefits and what it's doing to local watersheds?
Kat, you said it a whole lot better than I did. Thank you.
That's terrific. Any other comments or questions?
There's a question from Paul Thomas. And Paul asks, is there any interaction, interest, or data sharing with the International Kootenay Lake Board of Control? Paige did respond saying we have connected with them a bit over the years, but there is likely potential for further engagement as our data records continue to grow. Paige, did you have anything else that you wanted to add in there?
I guess just to say, you know, across a number of the areas we've discussed tonight, as we continue to build longer data records, we can do more with that data and inform, you know, further decision-making and processes. So that's an area that we're continuing to pursue and build those partnerships and collaborations.
But I do think, if it's okay, some of the folks on the call who are asking really good questions are at this meeting. It would be good to stay connected, because I feel like we can pursue on some of these things that have been raised. So if I'm not sure what the best process is for that, to be able to stay in contact.
The emails like Emily's and Braden's and Anne-Marie's emails are going to be sent to people for the groundwater stuff, and that may be a starting point, because it sounds like there's some people at this meeting that would really benefit by staying connected, and we would benefit by that connection. Yeah, it's great. Gotta love the AGM. Any other comments, or just see? I think.
I posted a comment in the chat related to British Columbia, the delta of the Fraser River, which is a huge transitional environment and also a groundwater system that is some of the communities have experienced terrible situations of flooding and water mismanagement. I wish we could benefit from your expertise here.
Let's follow up on that directly, Marco. If you'd like to reach out and get in touch, we could discuss some potential collaboration and knowledge sharing there.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am a member of the Stony Creek Environmental Committee, and we are in charge of habitat restoration in a small creek in Burnaby that still has salmon coming every year. In fact, we have tomorrow what we call the Great Salmon Send-Off, which is the release of several thousand juveniles salmon that we rear in a hatchery in New Westminster, and they go into this creek in the hands of the community, members of the community. Families take their kids, and youth and adults can participate, and all together we manage to deposit all these fish in the creek, which ensures that the population of coho salmon mainly returns year after year after they spend their lifespan swimming north into the Pacific Ocean. And tomorrow, we're very happy, not tomorrow, sorry, on Saturday. We have this Saturday, the Great Salmon Send-Off. We're very proud of this event that attracts the donors and government and other members of the community who actively participate in protecting these creeks from pollution, mainly by urban developers who are spilling occasionally cement or paint or chemicals into the creek, which changes the chemistry and for bad.
Great. Well, we will look forward to chatting with you further, Marco. It sounds like some really great work, and I bet we could both learn a lot from each other. So we'll look forward to working together.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your feedback. Whereabouts are you located, or your headquarters? Are they in Calgary or whereabouts?
In Nelson.
Nelson.
And for anyone else who's wanting to connect with our different staff, we will be sending a follow-up email with all the links that were shared throughout the entire AGM, as well as contacts to Anne-Marie and Braden. If you want to speak to our other staff that have been chatting and sharing with us tonight, I will add our Teams page, and you can go and find the specific person that you want to contact, find their contact information. Or you can email the general email, info@livinglakescanada.ca, and your questions will be passed on to the key Living Lakes staff that will help you out.
Thanks, Emily. I think with that, I am going to make a motion to adjourn the meeting, and I look forward to being on next year's as a attendee. Thanks, everybody.